Hello, and welcome to this edition of The Boomer Beat with your host, Bev Mahone. And today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Tori Dixon, who is a psychotherapist who practices out of Dallas, Texas. And we're going to be talking about 2020 and all of the things that we have all gone through and how to cope with the grief and the loss and the pain. But before we get started, I'd like to say thank you to my newest sponsor, forretirees.com. So thank you very much for being a sponsor of the show. And now let's get started. Hi, Tori. How are you?
I'm doing well, Bev. Thank you so much for having me this morning. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. And I also want to offer this disclosure that Tori and I actually connected on Twitter.
Yes.
She posted something and I thought, wow, this is deep. I want to connect with her. So that's how we connected on Twitter. So tell now you say that you are a psychotherapist. Tell me exactly what that involves.
A psychotherapist is synonymous with a licensed professional counselor. You can be a licensed clinical professional counselor. Sometimes even licensed clinical social workers will use the term psychotherapist. But typically, we are individuals who have completed a master's level, at least a master's level education. We've completed the National Certifying Counselors exam. And we are licensed in our respective state or states. Some of us are dual licensed in different states to practice mental health counseling and therapy. For many of us, also provide diagnoses or mental health concerns to individuals. And some of us, if you are a doctorate level psychotherapist and you have a medical experience, you are also allowed to as well administer psychotropic medication. So the term psychotherapist is just that basic term that says that you've gone to school and you've gotten proper licensure in your state to practice mental health counseling.
All right. Now, I know you're based out of Dallas or out of Texas.
Yes.
Are you licensed anywhere else in the United States?
I am only licensed in the state of Texas. However, I have a virtual practice in the state of Georgia, where I have two licensed clinicians in the state of Georgia who seeing clients virtually from our Graceful Journey Counseling virtual office. Here at our Dallas office, I am the licensed clinician, and then we have a licensed professional counselor associate. Her name is Ashley Coleman, and she works out of my Dallas office as well.
Did you know as a child that you wanted to go into this profession? I mean, I knew as a child that I always wanted to be a journalist. I knew that. But, I don't know if I would, as a child, would have thought, oh, I'd like to help people deal with their mental issues. So did you know?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. When I was younger, I always remember I was having this discussion with my mom the other day that I was saying I wanted to be an attorney. I wanted to be a lawyer. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a lawyer. And then I got to college and graduated from undergraduate. And the Lord called me actually into the ministry of service as a licensed funeral director and embalmer. And so once I completed my undergraduate degree at the University of Oklahoma, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and completed an Associates of Science degree in mortuary science from Gupton Jones College of Funeral Service. And by trade, I am a licensed mortician for the past 14 and a half years. And it was my background as a mortician professionally. So this is one reason, this is one way that the path ended up leading into therapy and into counseling. My background as a licensed mortician, and then back in 2003, my sister was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder at the age of 33, and nobody in our family knew really anything about mental illness. And so we knew that somebody would have to advocate for her on a level that none of us had had experience in doing. And so I decided, okay, let me go ahead and become a counselor, because that's the only way we're going to really be able to figure this out. And I will be able to bridge what I saw was a gaping hole between what we were doing as morticians on the funeral service side and the needs of families after they had already our services had terminated with them at the grave. And so I saw that families were grieving. I can tell you the story. The lady that really provoked this for me, she's now passed away, but her name was Miss Samuels. And her husband, they had been married since she was 16, he was 18. And by that point, I think they had been married for maybe 40 years at that point, maybe 45. And for months after his passing, she would call and ask me about little details of the service. And she would say, Tori, did we put his lapel pin on? And I said, yes, ma'am. Remember, we put the pin on. And she's like, what about his cufflinks? Did we have his cufflinks on? I said, yes, ma'am. We had his cufflinks on. And she probably called me once a week, if not twice a week, after the first year of his passing. And on the year anniversary of his passing, she came to the funeral home and she had asked me to put an in memoriam in the Atlanta Journal Constitution in the newspaper. And I sat with her and I said, well, how are you doing? And she said, I just am not doing too well. And I said, well, tell me what's going on. And she said, Tori, she said, for the 45 years that Sammy and I were married, she said, everybody knew that he was always the one that answered our home telephone. I never answered it. I don't care. I could be sitting right there looking at it and I never would answer the phone. He would always answer it. And she said, just yesterday, I was standing in the kitchen washing dishes and the phone rang. And on the third ring, I yelled out, Sammy, answer the phone. And that was the first time that I had realized in a year that he had passed. And she said, I feel like I'm starting this process all over again. About a year and a half after that, she fell ill, and there was no medical reasons attached to her illness. And her family believes, as do I, that she died of a broken heart. And that's when I really understood the depth of what grief does to an individual when they are not given the tools to properly put them on the best path to grieving and to integrating that loss into their new normal in the best ways possible. And so she's probably the reason that I knew as a licensed mortician that I needed to, if I wanted to be the best funeral director possible, I needed to have this portion with me. And that's how I got into it.
Wow. Well, that kind of like it really explains the name of your counseling service because it's, graceful counseling.
Yes.
And the thing of it is that, when I went to your website, I saw the words, working with clients with compassion and grace. And I
Absolutely.
thought, wow, who thinks of that? I mean, those two words just stuck out to me, and I just thought, you obviously, do it with such care, and the fact of this story that you've now told me that I do get it. So let's talk about 2020,
Yeah.
because who knew in 2019 that in 2020 we'd be dealing with the pandemic,
Yeah.
we'd be dealing with job loss, we'd be dealing with deaths of people that we know and don't even know, which even if we don't know them, the idea that more than 250,000 people have died from something that could have been avoided is just, to me, it's overwhelming. So
Unfathomable.
how do we process all of this information and what's happening to us mentally?
The one thing that we know about grieving, if you've ever done any readings or any research on grief, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is responsible for really laying the framework in the fundamentals of what the grieving process looks like. And what she did was she broke this grieving process down into 5 stages. The first stages of that is denial, where I like to say it's not denial that the thing didn't happen, but I like to call denial the mental emotional cushion that allows for the reality of the loss to catch up with the emotionality that is connected to it. And so that denial phase is where your mind is almost being protected from the reality of the devastation of the loss. And what we are going to have to remind ourselves of as a society is that many of us are still in the denial phase because, amongst all the other things that you've listed, many of us have been dealing with depression, anxiety, fear, worry, job loss, financial concerns, relational issues. We were dealing with those things prior to
Yes.
2020. And so to now have the weight of what has happened in the last 300 and what 50 some odd days, to now compound on us, we are in a collective state of denial that this is really where we are. And I think many of us, like most grievers, we're waiting to be able to turn the corner so that we can find a safe space to process everything that we lost in 2020. When we hear the word grief, which is the reason why it's been it's such a taboo subject. Nobody really knows what to say to a griever. The one thing that I found is that as I served families as a mortician, the one thing people say is, well, we don't know what to say. We don't know what to do. And families typically don't feel the impact of the loss until sometimes 30 to 60 days after having experienced that loss. Because by that point, everyone has returned to their own normal lives. And now you're left to live with the loss alone and by yourself. So I
Mhm.
think as a country, as a world, we are really at the precipice of that denial phase where we are trying to really make all of this make sense before we can really connect an emotion to what's been going on.
Well, it's interesting because my brother-in-law died from COVID complications in March.
My condolences.
And thank you. And he and my husband were very close.
Mhm.
And I don't think that he has gotten to the point that he really accepts his loss. And so over the Thanksgiving holiday, I kept saying to him, please call his wife. Please call her. Just let her know that you're thinking of her. She's still family, even though they recently got married. I mean, they haven't been married. They hadn't been married that long. And he was so reluctant to do it. And I thought, now, I'm not a therapist, but I thought it was because he felt that calling her would attach his brother and
Yeah,
he just wasn't ready to face it.
yeah.
So, how do we, as people who are trying to work with or trying to deal with people who have lost a loved one, what do we do?
The one thing that I think is so very important is to allow that individual to grieve the way that seems most comfortable for them, to be a participant, an active listener, to listen, to watch, right? So if you start to see that your loved one is, maybe breaking a little bit away from their routine, if you notice maybe they're not sleeping as well as they were prior to, if you notice that they're not eating the way that the way that they were prior to the loss, those are going to be some of the notable changes. But watch their emotionality. If you sense that there's more sadness there, a lot of times one of the things that's really helpful is just to bring it to their attention, because you have to remind yourself that they're going through a very internal process, and though grief for many of us is shared, it's a very individual thing. It's almost as individual, it's as individual and as unique as one's own fingerprint or one's own DNA. Nobody does it the same. And so if we are, I think a lot of times for those of us who are on the outside looking in and we are companions to a griever, we are looking for specific signs. We're looking for them to be or do something specifically, and that typically won't be the case because they're going to do it in their own way. But letting someone know that you're there to listen. Just say, I'm there to hear you out. If and when you are ready to talk, I'm here to listen. I'm here to to participate in this process with you. And sometimes just them knowing that brings a sense of comfort. You don't necessarily have to say anything. Sometimes people are wanting to, especially if you are of the faith and you're religious, you want to give scriptures and you want to maybe offer up some very popular cliches where, God doesn't make any mistakes, and, this person is in a better place. And theologically, that may sound okay, but emotionally, it doesn't, because why is this place without me better than being here with me, right? So it doesn't, it defies all of the logic of what one's emotional and mental space is when they're in the grieving process. So sometimes saying nothing at all is the best thing that can be said. Your presence is probably worth more than any words at that point.
Oh, okay. I like that. How do we know internally or even externally? How do we know if we are at the point where we need to see someone? I mean, is there something that triggers in us? Because, so many times, I make jokes about the fact that, yeah, I'm depressed today. And I probably am for a reason, but at what point do I get to you?
I would say here's the deal. I think everybody needs a therapist,
Oh,
just like everybody needs a primary care doctor. Your mental health and wellness should not necessarily be based upon some tragic event, right? Therapy is not the ER. Therapy is your PCP. It's your primary care doctor. It's your checkup when nothing's wrong, when everything's fine. That's why we do our yearlies. This is why we do mammograms. This is why we do our physicals. We do those things so that we can, it's more of a preventive medicine instead of reactionary medicine, right? So everybody needs a therapist. You don't have to have something wrong with you in order to see a therapist. Your brain needs to have a checkup. Everybody's brain needs to have a checkup. I recommend maybe once a month, sometimes maybe even quarterly, but check up. Go get a checkup. See where your thoughts are. See where your mind is. Stressors have a way of manifesting themselves in different ways for different people, right? So, stress for you may be I'm probably eating more than what I normally would. Stress for me may be I'm sleeping more than I normally would. But why don't we just go talk to somebody, regardless if something's going on or happening or not? Let's just do a checkup. Let's do a mental health checkup, right? So I think everybody needs a therapist. Everybody needs somebody to talk to. And for those of you who are in partnerships, the first inclination is going to say, well, I have my husband, or if you have your best friend, I have my best friend, or I have my sorority sister, or I have my sister in Christ, right? And I would say to you that those people oftentimes, even if you have a friend that's a therapist, right? So I'm a therapist and I have my group and my circle, and I tell them, you guys need a therapist because I'm not her, right? I'm your friend. And my capacity to be your friend becomes compromised when you ask me to exert or overstep myself in a space where I can't be of any help or any assistance. Right. So your girlfriends, your partner, they're not your therapist. They're your partner. They're your girlfriend. They're your friend. They're your parents. Go see a licensed clinician that can help you walk through some of the things that may be concerning to you.
do you recommend this if you're married or in a long-term relationship? Do you recommend you do it together or you do it individually?
I think everybody needs to have their own individual therapist. I think couples, I see a lot of couples, and oftentimes the issues that are concerning in the marriage oftentimes start from the individual, right? And so they are normally personal concerns. And because there is a personal concern, of course, that personal concern is now going to impact the relationship. And so I think it's important that partners have therapists. Go see a therapist because it's going to be really important in the health of your marriage. I say that a marriage is a compilation of two individuals that's coming together to actually create the life of the marriage. If one person is not feeling well, then the life of the marriage also won't feel well.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's real good. Okay. So, as we move into 2021, we're all going to be carrying some baggage, whether we want to or not. We
Absolutely.
all will be carrying something. How do we mentally step into the new year? Beyond the therapy, because I'm in agreement with you now. I never thought about the therapy as the PCP of your life, but I get that. But
Hmm.
how do we step into the new year with all of the baggage that we've got from 2020?
It's I think that's such a very, very interesting question. And I love that question because the one thing that I think 2020 has been requiring us to do is to unpack our luggage. I think many of us have been carrying baggage and luggage of life for quite some time. And so whenever I think about how do we take what we have been, what's been given to us in 2020 and making it a forward progress or moving forward, I say I like to use the grace method. And this is just something that I kind of came up with, um, that I think is going to be very interesting. We have to give ourselves grace and space to do what is going to be necessary for us to mentally, financially, and emotionally recover as we're moving forward. So grace, that G stands for to give myself permission to live my life, right? We have to give ourselves a level of permission to live life, to experience the goodness of what life still has to offer for us. The one thing that I think that trials and tests oftentimes tries to do is steal the hope of what tomorrow could look like. And if and when that happens, a lot of times that's when we find ourselves in despair. We find ourselves in states of depression and anxiety because we've lost hope. And so I'm going to encourage your listeners to renew and restore your hope and give yourself permission to live your life again. Yes, we have seen the best and the worst of humanity in 2020. We have seen the ups and the downs and the best and the worst of what politics has become and what people have become in our country. Yes, all of those things are true. Yes, you lost a loved one. Yes, you lost a job. But a part of the starting point of a healthy grieving process is to give yourself hope that tomorrow things can be better, that we can integrate these things into a new normal and our lives can be better. That R is, I think, kind of what I'm piggybacking off of with the giving yourself permission to live your life, and that is to redefine what life is for you. For many of us, everything that we've experienced in 2020 has required us to redefine what life really is, to reprioritize what's really important, to be very conscious and aware of the days and the time that we have and how we want to have it and how we want to spend it. A, be an advocate for yourself. Know when to say no. Um, have a good, healthy conversation with yourself about advocating for your life, for your peace, for no longer allowing things in your space that you are aware have been very unhelpful for you and has been toxic for you. Be your own advocate. Stop expecting government to advocate for you. Stop expecting partners to advocate for you. Stop expecting your work to advocate for you. Be your own advocate. Be your own advocate. See, create a space for your success. And that space is created by setting healthy boundaries. I was talking the other day and I was telling someone that what fortifies healthy boundaries is consistency. Be consistent with the boundaries that you are setting for yourself and the ones that you set for others in your life. And that E, be sure to examine your successes. Find the good. Be intentional about finding the spaces where you have been successful, both in 2020 and what we are to see in 2021. Although our year has been shrouded in uncertainty, it has been encompassed with loss, we have to find the good. All was not lost. A lot has been lost. For many, most have been lost, but all has not been lost. And we have got to be intentional about finding the good. You search it out. And when you find it, you write it down, you bind it to the tablets of your heart. And it is a reminder again that hope is going to be what we are going to need in order for 2021 to be the best that it can be for us.
Wow. Well, did you say E? Because I don't know if you said E.
E is examine your success, to find the good, to find the things that you were successful for about this in 2020, right? I've been telling my clients all year to readjust your expectations of yourself. We are not at full capacity. So what you were able to do in 2018 and 2019, 2020 required you to reassess your expectations of your own success, right? So if you were able to do all these things and then here comes 2020 and you're like, man, why do I feel so lethargic? Why am I tired all the time? That's because we're all grieving. That's because we are in the trenches and we are in the process of grieving. And we have to give ourselves the space to do that.
Grace.
Grace.
Wow. Okay. Well, I don't really know where to go from there, but if someone who is watching this and lives in Texas, how can they get in touch with you? And do you accept questions from anyone around the country?
Sure. To get in touch with me, you can visit me at my website, which is www.gracefuljourneycounseling, all one word.com. And you can always hit that submit a question button, and I will be more than happy to get back with you. You can find me on social media, particularly on Instagram and Twitter at When Tori Talks. And you can also find me on Facebook at Graceful Journey Counseling, and you can DM me through that medium.
All right. Tori, thank you. I mean, I thank you so much. You have really helped me in ways that you may never even know, but I really want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to talk with us about grief and loss and moving on into 2021. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Boomer Beat, sponsored by forretirees.com. And until next time, remember this: stay empowered on your journey. See ya.
Good news you can use for your life. If you want to get the info that'll help you throughout your life, yeah.